Happy New Year, everybody. It's 2019. It's our first podcast. We're trying to get back into the swing of things, so please bear with us. But we are the Cat's Whiskers podcast, and we're live. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the first Cat's Whiskers podcast of 2019. My name is Tina Taylor. Apologies for the tardiness if you are listening live. Again, we've been in hibernation, and I've kind of forgotten how you do all this over the Christmas period. Probably a little bit too much eggnog and memory loss, but hopefully not too much memory loss when it comes to talking about the hockey. We've got an awful lot of stuff to go through. So tonight, joining me to dissect everything that has happened over the festive and New Year periods are Sam Barm.
Hello.
And Joe Barm.
Hello.
Right then, Brothers Barm, we have an awful lot to go through. Bit of a patchy attendance for the two of you. I am very disappointed. But we will start off, if you cast your minds back to the 26th of December, Boxing Day, the now dubbed Christmas Classic, as it is, where we saw us playing on Boxing Day at the NIC for a change. And the Steelers came away with a 3-1 shootout. The Steelers came away with a 3-2 shootout win. We were on the side of the loss. Oh my God, I definitely have forgotten how to do this. Right. Panthers goals coming in the second period from Guptill and in the third from Rissling. Phillips scoring in the third and Matheson on the power play. Power play in the third period. Steelers. There's a thing, eh? Right. And then penalty shots ensued. Now, gentlemen, neither of you were able to be at the arena that day. And I hear there was a bit of an issue with the webcast.
Yeah, so we couldn't get the webcast, but when it went live onto YouTube, we could see sort of at the end of regulation and then overtime and penalty shots.
Oh well, lucky you. So basically, this is kind of all on me. Not that I remember an awful lot about it. I talked about memory loss earlier. I think I've had it. I mean, in terms of this game, it's the same every year. It's build to the highest of heights, and for the last few years, it's sort of generally been a bit of a disappointment, hasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's often been discussed between both fan bases about how sort of diluted it's become, and with us playing so often, and even though the Christmas sort of back-to-back is sort of special in terms of an event, if you will, and the on-ice product is pretty much usually the same as all the other ones. Even more so this year with the fact that neither teams are actually doing very well. I mean, the sort of physicality is pretty much non-existent in that fixture. I think it's almost unimaginable now to think that there could potentially be, say, a bench clearance in a Panthers versus Steelers fixture, but obviously there were different times back then, and with the way hockey's going now, I can't see it happening again, and I think we're just going to have to get used to this new sort of style of Sheffield versus Panthers, because it's not great viewing.
I mean, Sam, can you ever see a time in our Panthers supporting lives when the Christmas fixtures for Panthers might be it might be a different opponent that we're taking on, or is it just a thing now?
No, I don't see it changing. I mean, you've got Sheffield Boxing Day, and then you've got Coventry at New Year. Obviously, teams don't want to travel far at these times, so I don't see there being any sort of, with this. I don't even think like they would want to change it because they get the big crowds in, so from a financial point of view, it definitely benefits the Panthers. So I don't see why they'd want to change it.
One thing I did forget to say towards the top of the show, if you would like to get in touch with us while we're recording, please do so. Best way to do that is on Twitter. I am manning the Twitter feed as best I can while we're recording tonight, and it's at Cat's Whiskers TV if you are not already aware. I mean, in terms of the game, we'll sort of wrap up this the Boxing Day game itself. I mean, for me personally, having attended the game, I'm struggling to think of any particular talking points. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that we may have talked about before. There's, I cheekily mentioned the late power play that the Steelers got, and there was an awful lot of grumblings around me when that happened, as to the tune of, oh, here we go again, Steelers have got a late penalty, what a surprise kind of thing. But I mean, the one thing is that yes, they got that penalty, but they scored on it. They weren't forced to, but. We sort of allowed that to happen. So, it almost felt like a foregone conclusion, if I'm honest. But again, I in terms of particular incidents in that game, genuinely cannot bring anything to mind that happened that is maybe if we were only covering the two Boxing Day games, maybe there'd be something else, something I could sort of pick up, or if it weren't so long ago, maybe there's something else I could have thought of. But it was quite uneventful, and it's quite sad that it's come to that in the Christmas games. Especially this with this one being on TV, and you want to showcase the Elite League. For anybody who happens to come across Free Sports who's maybe not a hockey fan or a casual hockey fan, I'm not sure it was a game that would have got the the heartbeat going, and I don't think it would have particularly got anybody excited in terms of bringing a new bringing new fans in. Anyway, we'll leave the Boxing Day game there, and we'll move swiftly on to the return fixture up at the Fly DSA Arena in Sheffield. No points at all for Panthers this time. It was a 5-3 regulation loss. Now, I believe we've all watched this one. Panthers goals coming in, the first from Guptill, the second from Bolduc, and the third from Guptill as well. Steelers goals coming from McGrath in the first, Armstrong in the second, and in the third, Pitt, McFadden and McGrath on the power play. Bit of controversy with Bolduc did score in the second, and it was one of the I think one of the things that one of the shouts that was rife from the household I was watching watching the game in was, scratch that one if you can, because Bolduc had actually scored and it was disallowed, and I mean even Tom Barrasso in his post-game interview said that they were lucky. And that sort of says to, I'm paraphrasing, but it sort of says to me that he thought there was nothing wrong with the goal. So the only people who really thought there was anything wrong with the goal were with the referees. I mean, obviously they're privy to camera angles that we're not. But Joe, but I mean, we've got the argument for the Bolduc goal, and would it have changed anything? But we went on to lose anyway after Bolduc scored again. So, can you see it that it would have made any difference anyway?
Potentially. I suppose you'd hope that if we went on to have a 2-goal lead, we'd maybe sort of not let that one slip. But as a as we saw, we went up 3-2 and then gave away 2 quick goals. So I suppose it's just sort of circumstance, like if. I suppose it's just if. I mean, yeah, we could have kept on, sort of kept the lead, and you'd hope we would, but I mean, who knows? I suppose the Panthers' defence in recent weeks aren't exactly something that would fill you with hope. So, and like Barrasso said, that disallowed goal did give them sort of a boost, a bit more motivation, sort of a bit of belief that they could get back into the game. So if they did not have that, there might have been a bit of continuation on Sheffield's performance, and we could have come out with a win. But I suppose if on a performance as a whole, if you're just going to if you want to go out and win the game, you should put the effort in and make sure that these games aren't sort of hanging on the balance of one incident. And Sheffield weren't great in the game, so if we'd actually turned up and played well, they were there for the taking. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sam, the one thing, that kind of overrides all of this, I suppose, is that, over those 2 games, the old Christmas classic, as we're calling them now, we've come out of that, with 1 point of a potential 4, and like Joe says, Steelers aren't. I mean, neither of us are doing particularly well, form wise and results wise, and taking everything into account. But surely we should have expected to have done better than that.
Well, I think we always expect us to do better, but it's always tempered by the fact that we know how bad the Panthers are at Christmas. For whatever reason, I mean, new coach, supposedly a new era, exactly the same, Well, no, actually, they're slightly different. We did score this Christmas against Sheffield compared to last, and we did get a point. So, yes, it's an improvement, but is it a good enough one? No.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't give you any confidence, does it? Going into the remainder of the festive period's games. We'll move on. We might as well. I mean, as I said, we've got a lot of games to talk about, so there's no point sort of dwelling too much on one particular game. Although I think we've got one particular game that might just get the tempers flaring on the podcast a little bit, but we'll come to that in a while. Saturday, 29th of December, we went down to the Sky Dome. Not so much in the last couple of seasons, but certainly historically we don't do well down there. So there's always the possibility that we'll come away with nothing. And this time, once again, we did. Panthers goals coming from, in the second period, from the now released Marek Tverden, Dylan Richard and Pellini on the power play. And in the third period, Alex Guptill. And opposition goals from Coventry coming from, in the first from Nicky Forrick and Crowder. In the second from Pauly. And in the third, Ferrara and Venus. Couple of things from that game. John Rowe, it was his first game after returning from injury. His minutes were very highly managed to try and make sure we didn't break him before we got back into the swing of things, I'm guessing. And another bit of controversy, actually. A goal disallowed for Panthers because the net was off. Because I didn't... I didn't really... I'm trying to remember if I actually saw this game at all. Seemed to recall seeing a replay on Twitter but I mean, when it first sort of broke on social media, I believe that... no, in fact, I didn't see this game. I had planned to. Oh dear. I really need to get myself a I really need to get myself a few brain cells back. But yeah, when I saw this sort of blowing up on Twitter, there were people saying that the goal had been off for a significant amount of time, and the referee had seen it. Having seen a replay on Twitter, there was a little video that got released. It wasn't quite off for as long as I sort of was led to believe by the tweets that I'd seen. But the net did get kicked off, and then Panthers scored. But so by the letter of the law, the referees have they've called it right, because for the goal to stand, it has to be taken off in the course of the shot going in, going towards the net, and it was there was enough of a break between the both of them. I don't know if you saw any of that particular incident, guys.
I saw that incident, but from sort of the opinions that I saw on Twitter on the night, I thought it was. And then from watching the actual sort of clip on the highlights, I didn't think it was sort of as bad as some people made out. I don't know. It might have looked different compared to sort of on the video to those that if you're actually there watching the game live. But like you said, Tina, by the letter of the law, if the net's off and the puck goes in, it shouldn't count. So not really an issue with that from what I see, and because it didn't feel that long that the net was off before the ref blew it. So for me, no issue.
No, and I mean it's like similar to the point that I think you made earlier, Joe. I mean, games should not be hanging on a knife edge. We should, if we're gonna, if we're gonna have these close games, we've really got to be better at protecting any lead that we have, or we've got to be more, more forceful. We've got to press the issue more and not leave it so close, because the amount of times this season that we have, it's been a close game and we've let it slip is, it's not doesn't bear thinking about, really, does it? Again, can't really, as none of us watched that particular game, not really able to sort of recall any other incidents of note that happened from a Panthers perspective, unless you guys can think of anything, and if not, I'll move on to New Year's Eve.
I'd just like to say how shocked I was to hear that a Panthers goal had been disallowed because the net was off in Coventry. I was very glad I was sat down when I heard that.
Your shock is duly noted.
Yeah.
I think a few of us share it, because that sort of thing never happens. Anyway, New Year's Eve, the return fixture for the Coventry Blaze, and finally we get a win. Because for as much as we hate going to the Sky Dome, the Blaze do not like coming up to the NIC. Their record in our barn is almost as bad as ours is in theirs, possibly a little bit worse at the moment. I think we've had a sort of upturn in fortunes down there in the last couple of seasons, whereas their record hasn't changed an awful lot, I don't think. So anyway, Panthers goals coming in the first from Guptill on the power play. Yes, you heard that right, on the power play. In the second from Richard and Farmer, and in the third from Pelini and Olsen. Blaze goals coming in the second period from Crowder on the power play, and then Morris. And in the third, I knew he was scoring, I will pronounce this wrong, Brinisfen. So yes, a 5-3 win for the Panthers, and my word, some actual proper points. Sam, unfortunately, you had to do that horrible thing called work, didn't you? So it's this one's for me and Joe to talk about. So just prior to the game, one piece of news that Panthers tweeted out and social media'd and stuff was the departure of Marek Tverden. Joe, I think it's fair to say that particular piece of news was met with a whole lot of meh.
Well, I think a large portion of the fan base would have been pretty pleased to see him go because I don't think he particularly justified his position on the roster because, I mean, coming in, we saw he was a point per game in what a poor Edinburgh team last year, and we were told by Chernomaz that he'd come in and improve our power play, and since he came in, our power play jumped off a cliff and and died. So yeah, he definitely didn't do that. So when you're proclaiming that this bloke's going to come in, improve our power play and also, be sort of improve our offensive output, if he's not doing that and he's falling way short of the mark, then you've got to make a decision, and I think the decision was correctly made to cut him.
Yeah, well, I suppose that is one thing about this new era, if you will. I mean, last. When Corey Nielsen made a cut halfway through the season, that was big news. But Rich Schoenematz does not seem to be afraid to make those decisions at all. I mean, like you say, Taverden's come in and he's not really done what was expected of him, and shock horror, he's been sent on his way. It's not really, you can't really argue with that, can you? So you just. I mean, he was decent. He is a decent enough skater, and he was a body when we needed a body. But now that we're getting guys back, the Panthers really sort of have to think about whether they want a body on their roster or whether they want a body of purpose. And it just didn't work out for Taverden. He just didn't. He just didn't produce, basically. So and that's really what we need. Our offensive production is what's the word, inconsistent. It's woefully inconsistent, and so I think we need more than that, really. Again, the Blaze game at home, Joe, unless you can think of anything, I can't think of anything to talk about. I mean, and this is becoming a bit of a theme. I mean, New Year's Eve I can take. I can take there being no incidents and nothing particular of note to talk about because we won. If there's games of little consequence but we're coming out with 2 points, I can live with that personally. That's fine. But games of little consequence are becoming a bit of a theme, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, although I will say that I thought the game was a slight improvement on some of the performances we've seen previously, like against Sheffield and games before Christmas. I did think it was a bit better, but still not the sort of levels you'd be expecting to see consistently if you want to be sort of, for example, where we are now, third. You'd expect a sort of a high caliber of performance, and we just didn't hit that. So when we're sort of just scraping away with victories, then you sort of like all games sort of seem to roll into one. They just come a bit meh, and then over a season, they sort of all roll up into just one season where it's just then again a bit meh. So, yeah.
I remember obviously you, unless you listened to unless you were avid listeners of the podcast last season, guys, you won't sort of have the benefit of this particular conversation. But I remember several times last season on the podcast we had a discussion about would you take boring hockey where you're winning every game over over exciting hockey, but you're losing more often than you than you're winning. And just as a backup to that, I was having a chat with your dad a few weeks back in the pub, and I said, I said that's sort of similar to that. If we were winning, and it was hockey of sort of boring hockey, then you could live with that. But we're not winning, and we've not got a lot to talk about, which it just kind of makes it frustrating. But it's just. It's not what we were expecting. The team that was signed. We've got big bodies. We've got guys who can, who can, throw you into the boards. With some vigor, and we're just not getting it, and it's a bit sad. But and again, if we were winning, that probably wouldn't be an issue. But I don't think we're getting the wins as consistently enough to make up for that. For me personally,
I think, like you said, if we were playing boring hockey and still getting the wins, if that then led on to sort of was winning the league, I think pretty much all fans would accept that, because the fact that you've won the league is the justification for you paying your money to see this team throughout the season. But if you're sort of even if you're falling short and coming second, you just watched and paid for a season of boring hockey for essentially nothing, which is like what Chernham has said at the start of the season, that the team we're going to see is going to be exciting hockey. He understands that the fans are paying their hard-earned money to come and watch the Panthers, so it's going to be an enjoyable team. And it's anything but that.
It started well, but it just seems to have really dropped off, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, before we get into a sort of a big discussion and make this a 2-hour-long podcast, let's we'll leave that there for the minute. We may very well come back to it, perhaps, but we've got to a game now where we can actually bring Sam in. So we'll steam ahead with that. So first game of 2019 for the Panthers. We took on the Flames at home, and hurrah! Yay! More points. 3-1 win. So the Panthers' goals in the first from Alex Guptill, and no more till the third when Lepine with a quite astounding finish, actually, as I recall, and Kovacs with an empty netter sealed the deal. The opposition goal coming in the third period from Kali Akarid. No surprise there, because that man is a points machine. Rich, if you do happen to be sticking around for Panthers next season, I would highly appreciate you having a word with that guy. Anyway, so Henderson returns from injury in this particular game. Other than that, Sam, weren't a lot to talk about, was there?
No, I could have quite cheerfully gone to sleep. It was extremely boring. Personally, I think it was a victim of when the game was scheduled. I mean, if you look at the arena schedule, there's not another concert till the end of January. I mean, would there not have been the opportunity to put it back further in January? Or, was it just the Panthers wanting to get one last milking out of the Christmas cow? But yeah, it was a performance that was a very tired one from both teams, and yeah, it was just a dull game.
I mean, I was actually quite, you say that it was sort of one last milking of the Christmas cow, and I was quite surprised at the attendance. I thought 2nd of January, and everybody's burnt out from Christmas, and if I weren't a season ticket holder, I would have, I think I would have been tempted to give that one a miss, if I'm honest. It's you're sort of on the recovery. I mean, to be honest, that was my first day back at work after a week and a half off. So, it was a bit kind of, I've got to get home and get myself changed and ready to go out to the game. It was a hard slog, I must admit. So, yeah, you can call it, a milking of the Christmas cow if you like, but I mean, you can't you cannot take away from, the marketability of the Panthers. And, when all's said and done, this is where the money comes in. It's the main financial financial pool for the Panthers is bums on seats, and it does say something for the marketability of the Panthers if on the 2nd of January we can get an above average attendance. That surprised me. That surprised me a lot. But yeah, I don't think the fans were rewarded. We were rewarded with 2 points. Let's not forget that. It was a much needed 2 points. But in terms of the performance, it was another meh effort, if I'm honest. But again, I will stress, it was another 2 points. So can you grumble at that too much? Yeah. No, I mean, I do agree with you, Sam, about the schedule and the fixture. It was a bit. It was just a sort of messy New Year period all round for me. I think it was just a bit too much. And I mean, when we're so far ahead in games as it is, I think it was probably one that could have waited. For my opinion. Joe, anything you want to add to that game?
No.
Okay, doke. Well, I will just mention again. It gets a lot of criticism, but hats off to Guy Lepine for that goal, because I think that was a forwards finish, and it's not something you expect to see from him. So yeah, it was
not one of our forwards.
well, I don't know. I mean, Guptill's only just been pushed into second place for is it top point scorer or goal scorer? I forget which it is. I think it's points, isn't it?
Yeah.
So at least we've got one who's regularly contributing. Anyhow, right, so let's move on to games that are a bit more fresh in the memory, and one on Saturday that was extremely difficult to take. We were all there for this particular offering. This is the one where it might get a little bit... there might be a bit of feeling going on with this one. Panthers goals coming from Bolduc in the second, Henderson in the third. 5 goals coming from Basaraba, Crowder and Finucci with a short-handed effort in the first. Shaber on the power play, Bloodoff in the second, and Crowder finished it off on the power play in the third period. So this saw Five Flyers taking a 6-2 victory out of the NIC. Now, one thing I really, really do take issue about with the Flyers, I think the Flyers played very well. Certainly for the first half of the game, they were dominant, they were clinical, they were getting themselves in the right places, and they absolutely tore us apart. We just didn't seem to have an answer for them. But the one thing I will not praise them on is the fact that probably when they did have the game in the palm of their hands, and there was absolutely no chance of us bringing it back again, they started falling about. There were penalties called, which, yeah, fine, they were penalties. Most of the penalties I completely agreed with, because they were penalties, but some of those Flyers players were going down far too easy for me. The first incidents of that I recall in the game was Bolduc was driving to the net. Puck either got saved or it got deflected up into the netting, and Shane Owen caught a stick in his mask. Not a particularly hard one, or it wasn't it didn't sort of go through the grill or anything like that, and he fell about like he'd been shot. I mean, it was that bad that our mascot was taking the mick, and they didn't need to. The point where if they were doing all of that and trying to draw penalties because they were behind and they were doing everything they could to try and win the game, a game that they weren't winning, fine, but they weren't. They had absolutely no need to do any of it. It just wasn't necessary. I don't know if either of you guys saw this any differently to what I did, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who have differing views on it. Sam, do you want to come in on any of that first? Just, I mean, call me out as being wrong if you like. I really don't mind, but that's just how I saw it.
No, I mean, he's got a touch of the Brian Stewart about him, hasn't he? I mean, there was a lot from a lot's made of, Fife don't have an enforcer, they don't really have anyone who can fight. From what I saw, they're not going to need it because they're never made accountable for anything they do. Owen comes and after Tetlow fights, and their player drops his gloves in the fight and tries to throw a punch, but can't get one in. Doesn't get anything for it. I mean, if you drop your gloves, for me, that's 5 minutes, or at least a 2. And then Owen comes out, 2-handed cross check with his stick in the back of Tetlow. Only gets 2 minutes for that. It's a bit because at the end of the day, he knows realistically he can do what he wants because the goal is, unless he does something really bad, he's not going to get kicked out. It'll just be one of his teammates has to go sit for him. So, there's a bit. Wasn't really that good sportsmanship, personally, I think. But at the end of the day, I can't complain about any of the penalties we took. I mean, some maybe I thought were soft, but you can see why they were called. I mean, like for the one Pither got given, if you go around dangling your stick between someone's skates, you're just asking for the referee to call it. You're giving the referee an opportunity. And personally, for me, I think Pither takes far too many penalties like that. Yes, you try and get the puck back, but doing it like that, it's only going to cause you problems. And we don't want Pither sitting in the box. We want him on the ice. But yeah.
I mean, Joe, I would like you to don your fight correspondent hat for a moment. I mean, you haven't got an awful lot to comment on. Tetlow's sort of he's obviously received an instruction because he's not. But being a young lad, he's in the Panthers team. I don't see him as being all that forthright a player in himself. He's more of a sort of he's learning, and he's trying to he's trying to be a defenseman, first. But something needed to happen in the game, and he's obviously received instruction to go and do that. And he's not messed around really, has he?
No, I suppose sort of being sort of the young one on the team, I suppose him doing it more than anybody could be seen as a kick up the backside, because it's like, hey, rest of the team, I'm the youngest one, and I'm trying to, sort of give us a spark here. The rest of you get going. So, yeah, I think, well, I don't, because it was a sort of holding the defenseman accountable for the hit on farm, which I don't necessarily think was entirely sort of needed, because I didn't think the hit in the first place was sort of penalty worthy. Because I think while Farmer may have been a clash of knees, I don't think it was sort of the principal point of contact or intent. But I suppose you sort of hitting two birds with one stone with what Tetlow did. And I mean, I've seen videos from him when he was in the league below, the NIHL, having fights and that. And to say he's I suppose he would have been about 19 back then. He can certainly handle himself. So, yeah, One of the bright sparks for a very good dull game.
Yes, very much so. Now, I will just sort of stick with you here, Joe, because one of the things that I heard a lot of, and I know what you're saying about the hit on Farmer. I don't think it was. I don't think there was intent. I think it was awkward more than anything. I think Farmer's just been caught awkwardly. But and I refer to this a lot. It's like. The hit that Jonathan Boxhill received open ice from I forget the guy's name, but it was a really tall chap from Hull, and he said afterwards, it was a perfectly clean hit. I just wanted to send a message, and that's the kind of that's the example I use where in circumstances like this. Yes, it wasn't penalty worthy, but you've got a guy down on the ice, so regardless of anything, you probably want a reaction. You probably want. I mean, Farmer himself, probably wanted somebody to just sort of say, "Hey, come on, that's not right." And one of the things I did hear at the end of the game was that Tetlow did what Lepine should have done earlier. Because Lepine went over and challenged the guy, and the Lepine of old would probably wouldn't have given him the choice. He probably wouldn't have given him he probably wouldn't have afforded him the opportunity to not fight him, or he would have just punched him and got a fighting an unwilling combatant penalty, if that's even still a thing. So I mean, where do you sit on that particular train of thought with the Tetlow stepping up and doing what Lepine should have done?
I agree, sort of, even though there wasn't necessarily a need for an accountability, you also do kind of send a message saying you're not going to sort of hit us like that and sort of get off scot-free. So, yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. Regarding whether Lepine should have done it, I don't necessarily agree with, because if Lepine did what Tetlow did, Lepine would have been, well, you would assume that Lepine would have got the same penalty as Tetlow and then been kicked out of the game. So, is Lepine sort of looking at it as a view in terms of he's a captain, should he be getting himself kicked out of the game if he's sort of like the import defenseman? So I suppose if he's taking it from that sort of viewing it as like that, then can you really blame him for not to? I mean, he certainly tried to sort of get the bloke to fight sort of legally so that they would both get 5 minutes, but the guy didn't want to fight, so you can't really do a lot, can you? Unless you do what Tetlow does, but we've seen now that sort of the rules have changed, and if you do that, you would assume now every time a player does it, it's going to be kicked out of the game. So,
now, one big piece of news this week for this past week for the Panthers was that Chris Stewart was signing with us. Fans of the Panthers, if you've been a fan of the Panthers for a few years, then you will remember Anthony Stewart, his brother, coming to play for us during the last NHL lockout. Came and played for us for half a season. There's a thing. So yeah, Chris Stewart comes in having played in the NHL not so long ago. So it's sort of it's a long way from where he was. I mean, Sam, we had. He had an explosive start to his Panthers career. Not so good in the sort of following periods, shall we say? I mean, his poor pass on the power play, on the power play led to the short-handed goal. So, I mean, first game, probably shaking off quite a bit of rust, having, not played yet this season. But is there some potential there for some good things to come from Chris Stewart for the Panthers?
Yeah, but, with the anyone playing for the Panthers, it not take long for their ability to be coached out of them. I mean, his first shift was his best. I think, during the game, he got shunted around a bit, Farmer getting injured. Um, I mean, personally, I think the line he started on is not going to be a line that he should stay on. I mean, with Henderson and Farmer, that for me is not a good utilisation of his skill set. Um, on the power play, he's had very little time to work with that. I mean, if you think Stewart's going to come in and save our power play, then you're wrong, basically, because the only person that could resurrect our power play is Lazarus. I mean, at the minute we might as well just slap a do not resuscitate order on it and just start again, because it's a joke.
You really thought about that, didn't you? You really considered your response there, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, he's got potential, but people come in with potential, the Panthers, and that soon gets coached out of them. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Okie dokie.
Can I add?
Yes.
I'll just add I know it was only his first game, but from watching him, I thought he was really sort of strong and on the puck, which a lot of our forwards aren't this year. I mean,
despite their size.
Oh yeah, but I mean, for example, Kovacs, I could not be able to count how many times he's sort of skated up the ice, sort of been put under a bit of pressure from a D-man or a back checking forward, and then coughed up the puck. And he's not the only one. Hurtubise is another. It's just quite frustrating. But from what I saw of Chris Stewart, I thought he was strong on the puck. He was holding players off. There wasn't like they were trying, but he didn't sort of look sort of at all worried. And like Sam said, I don't think you're utilising his sort of best skills and assets by having him on a line with Henderson Farmer. I mean, yes, he knows Henderson, but like they said, like Henderson said in that interview, I think, or it might have been Stewart, that they've been friends for about 15 or more years. But I don't think they've played on the ice that much. So like when we signed Bolduc and Hurtubise and Bolduc, they have more of a chemistry together, because even though I don't think they've played on sort of the same team together before, they have trained a lot together. I don't think Henderson and Stewart have. So I don't think, although they know each other very well, I don't think that was sort of the right line to put him on. So I think he should be further up the lines with some more of our forwards who can get more of an offensive output out. So I think you'll see more of him, or get more out of him, I should say, if you put him with more offensively minded forwards.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing I would say, in reaction to that is, he's sort of arrived and been cleared to play. He's had like a day, so it does sort of make sense immediately to have him, out with Henderson, somebody he knows, and probably somebody he can communicate with well at the very least. So, now there's a whole week of training, however many training sessions the Panthers are going to have. They've got some time. Coaches got some time to figure out the lines a little bit better. And obviously he's potentially going to have to do that without Robert Farmer. Because we haven't heard anything yet about how long, if he's going to be out for any other games and how long. So. Yeah, no, I completely accept your point there, Joe. But yeah, as I say, I think that's that's kind of a time constraint more than anything for my opinion. Right, we will wrap up the games then with last night's game against the Storm up in Altrincham. As I was the only I was the only one who saw it, but I didn't really see it because for the first time in ever, I think. It actually appeared that Adam was more enthusiastic to watch the game than I was. We'd sort of loosely sort of planned it and said, yeah, come on, let's get it, and whatever, what else is there on a Sunday night? I was very tempted to let him just carry on watching the FA Cup, but there you go. But yeah, he when I suggested not watching it, he actually sounded quite disappointed. So when I had recovered from that particular shock, then we bought the game. No scoring in period one. Panthers goals coming in the second from Brett Pellini, and in the third, Kovacs and Pellini on the power play. Manchester goals coming in the second period from Long and Poulan, and in the third from Springer to tie it up. And then a penalty shot from Dane Byers sealed the deal in overtime for the Storm. So 1 point coming from that particular game. Storm were looking for a bit of a light at the end of their tunnel. They seem to be trapped down in 10th place. They've been sort of languishing down the bottom end of the table for a while, and they were obviously looking for a bit of a bounce back after their result the previous night. I would like to think that Panthers were looking for a bit of a bounce back from the result the previous night, but we kind of got it. It was a good sort of backwards and forwards game, if you will. I'll be completely honest. I actually spent more time writing the agenda for tonight's podcast than I did watching the game. I think it's starting to get to me. This the situation with our team, and I'm less and less enthusiastic about watching. I mean, and this is why I suggested not bothering to watch the webcast. I'm sure Manchester Storm TV are very happy with my decision to go for it because they got a tenner off me. But I wasn't all that invested in watching the game, so I can't really tell you anything about the goals because I didn't really see them. We played more competitively. I can't really convincingly say whether or not it was better or worse than the previous night, but it was a more competitive game. Again, not really any massive incidents. I think the only one that really springs to mind for me is John Rowe taking a retaliatory penalty when he slashed who I forget who it was, a Manchester Storm player who put a fairly decent check on him. I didn't see anything wrong with the check on the replay, but Rowe obviously took umbrage with it and lashed out with his stick, and quite rightly took a slashing penalty. So and I mean, other than that, there was the incident that led to the penalty shot. Yeah, fair enough, we banged to rights. The Storm player going up to goal, I can't even remember if it was Byers or not. He got in behind all our three players, and it was a last ditch sort of attempt at trying to stop a goal, and in the end it didn't matter because Garnett couldn't save the penalty shot. Byers took it really well, put in a captain's performance, if you will. So I mean, the only other thing I do want to quickly talk about that kind of stuck in my mind with regards to Sunday's game is that was the third game in a row that Tim Billingsley has not iced, and there has been very little communicated about his absence. He's been down as a scratch, but I don't recall a press release from the Panthers saying whether he is a healthy scratch or whether he's injured. And for me personally, Joe, I'll come to you on this first. This has sort of shades of what happened when we released Jacob Doty.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of talk on social media and other sites that Billingsley's sort of is being cut or he will be cut. But I mean, 3 games is now, is it?
It is 3, yeah.
So we're coming up to 2 weeks then.
Yeah, which is which is sort of
So,
yeah. I mean, it's the conclusion I kind of came to personally, but I mean, of all the
what I will
players,
say though is Taverden. It wasn't the same for Taverden though.
no, it really wasn't. That was quite an
So
instant sort of thing, wasn't it? So,
yeah,
which just makes it all the more confusing. I mean, for me, Sam, I think that if we are gonna cut somebody else from this Panthers team, I can't say Billingsley's anywhere near the top of my list. Would you agree with that?
100%. For me, I don't really. We've got spare forwards. If you want to play Tetlow ahead of Billingsley, fine. But why are we cutting a spare defenseman? Because you can actually just be like, look, we'll cut Billingsley and then we'll get in, Olsen will get injured or Hughes or something like, someone like that. So for me, I think potentially, unless you're bringing in a defenseman, I wouldn't get rid of Billingsley. If we've got to cut someone, there's plenty of forwards I'll get rid of in a heartbeat.
And Joe, I mean, the other thing with Billingsley, which I didn't see coming, but it was a nice surprise, is that he's actually been playing as a forward while we've had injuries, and he's been plugging that gap, and he's actually been doing it pretty well, hasn't he?
I mean, he's no worse than some of our forwards,
and they are supposed to be forwards.
Yeah. But I don't think I won't say he's a long-term option. I don't think he's got quite the versatility that, say, Lindhagen had, as in terms of being a forward. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, for the short term, I have no problem. But I think if it's becoming a long-term thing, I think you either got to make a decision, either play him on defence and then Tetlow moves back down to, or I suppose, does Billingsley become 7th D? Or I don't know, or bring in another forward.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see how that one unfolds because it's a massive head scratcher for me. There's precious little information about, what he's being scratched for, whether it's in preparation for a departure or whether he's got personal issues. I mean, he had to have a leave of absence earlier in the year, so if it's something related to that, then fine, fair enough. Let him get on with it, and he did
train. He did warm up the other night.
Well, yeah,
and got caught. Or scratched.
Well, I never get there for warm up anyway, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, we'll have to see because, as I say, I don't think I liked him, Billingsley. I think he's a decent player, and I would hate to think he's fallen out of favour. We could there's. I think there's one or two others who could benefit from a bit of a bit of a message, a bit of a sit down. So, as I say, we'll see how that one develops. So that's all the games covered. We're now up to date. Few bits of Panthers related news. We'll cast our minds all the way back to Boxing Day, where the Panthers kept us very, very quiet because I didn't know anything about this until it happened. But Jimmy Pack graced us with his presence. I am sad to say that Jimmy Pack's playing days predate my support as a Panthers fan, but I always hear very good things about him. Is he a player that you guys remember seeing?
No.
All right. So it's a shame. It's a shame we didn't get your dad on. I'm sure he could have told us some stories. But yeah, he was received very well by the Panthers faithful, and he was sporting a number 2 Jimmy Pack jersey, which is being auctioned for charity. So I believe the bids are still being accepted for that. I didn't even bother looking because knowing Panthers fans, it will be an absolutely astronomical amount of money already. So yeah, if you've got some very deep pockets, then have a look and see what you can do, because it's any money raised, I believe this is a charity auction. So yeah, some good cause is going to benefit from it. One little congratulation goes to Joe Hazeldine. He's named to the GB Under-18 squad for the forthcoming World Championships. So I mean, the only sad part of that is that Panthers haven't really had an awful lot to do with that particular that particular story. I'm not gonna try and take credit for on the Panthers' behalf for a player we I mean, he's training with us, and he's playing the odd minute here and there, but I can't really say that we've had much to do with him getting that GB Under-18 place. But whatever, the congratulations are fully deserved, and I'm sure he will do very well in that squad. And they are they're hoping for for big things for the World Cup Championships tournament. We'll have a little bit of discussion over this one, guys. It was pointed out, and I'm not sure who got to it first, that the Panthers' social media bio, basically, and I'll probably be paraphrasing a little bit here. It says, this is the social media guys. It's not the management. It's not the organisation. It's sort of basically what what is being hinted is that they're receiving an awful lot of heat on Twitter, that they are not well placed to do anything about. So I mean, it's become a thing, hasn't it, really? That, the social media accounts will get tagged, when there are complaints to be made. And I think we're all probably a little bit guilty of that on this podcast, as well as, any other Panthers fan. It just seems to be a natural human thing. You're upset about something, and now you tweet about it, and you're tagging the people that you're unhappy with. Sam, it's caused a bit of discussion on the day that it all sort of came about, really, because it sort of indicates a sort of separation from from the online persona to the club itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and it just completely fits into the Panthers' whole tone of voice, the sort of keeping the fans at arm's length, not really interested in what it is that they've got to say. For me, it was sort of, because of how sort of closed in the Panthers are, where have the fans got to go to vent their frustration? The general manager, the owner, they're very behind closed doors. So how, of the occasional radio interview with the coach, you never see him on the TV ones. It's all very managed. So how there's no real way other than through the social media for Panthers fans to vent their frustration at the club and to tell the club what it is that they're thinking. And for me, it just sort of says, this is the social media going, don't have a go at me. It's nothing to do with me. Just move along. Don't bother. And it just, for me, just fits in with a tone of voice that's very hands off from the fans, trying to, keep them at arm's length, managing them, away. And as well, if you go on about the social media being poor, to be honest, especially Twitter updates for, I haven't been to, be able to get to some games over the period. And for me, I think the updates have been very poor. They've been, quite spotty. And update-wise, it's just sort of almost like when the opposition score, it's, such and such take the lead, and it's always quite sarcastic and that for me, and especially I felt like if we're losing and they'll put up an end of period score, and then just like sarky things like work to do and things like that. For me, it really doesn't come across in a good way.
Joe, I mean, Sam's obviously very impassioned about the subject, and I can't imagine that you won't have something to say about it. I mean, just put yourselves in the shoes of the social media guys for a moment. I mean, they felt it necessary to, make that distinction. I mean, one thing, if you just sort of try and imagine, how little effect, they can have on, what the fans are complaining about. I mean, I sort of had to think about it one day, and I thought, well, all these updates, all these tweets that they're having about, the play being poor and, this, that, and the other. I mean, how do you imagine that they might communicate what the fans are saying to the general manager and the owner? Is it something that, I don't know? Can you imagine that they might just like mention it? When they were in the office, or is it something that that you think that they might, I don't know, sit and write a report on? I mean, just imagine the amount of complaints they would have to deal with. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, I suppose, but having access to a Twitter account. I mean, I used to be part of Panthers Hockey Live, and the amount of times that we had to tell people that we weren't actually connected to the organisation because of the abuse that we were receiving, it was just ridiculous, and so for an official account, I suppose they're probably receiving much more than what Panthers Hockey Live ever did. So there is a whole sort of, there's a big bubble to cover there, isn't there? There's a whole big bubble of things, that that maybe fans don't really think about.
I can see how that must sort of be difficult for them, because sort of they are the mouthpiece for the club, as it were, but they're also the first to get hit with anything sort of fired back at them by fans. So I can see why it might be difficult for them. And regarding your question about whether they sort of, I don't know, like write a report, or at least sort of, communicate with those higher, I very much doubt. I can't imagine those higher up in our organisation give much of a thought as to what the fans think about anything regarding the club or what's going on sort of on the ice. I mean, I had when it was sort of blew up over social media, I had a conversation about it with the social media bloke on Twitter, and he said that it was copied from the Montreal Canadiens Twitter bio, and it was done about a month prior to sort of it blowing up on Twitter, and he said it was just a bit of fun. Now, for me, I've got no problem with the club sort of having a little bit of fun with the social media. I think we're in a world where far too many things are taken seriously nowadays, so I have no issue with that. But for me, I don't see how that's a joke. I don't see how that's funny. I don't look at that and think that's a joke, that's funny. Even with the context that it's copied from an NHL team, I don't see how. Yeah, I don't see how that can be considered funny. But I think, like you said, that the people who run the social media, they are the people who sort of are the first to receive all this sort of all the comments and all the opinions of the fans. And I just think it's a bit naive to put that Twitter bio out there, to change it to that, even though it might be for a bit of fun, considering that they must sort of feedback they receive, because we know that the Panthers fans don't, or sort of aren't, as some sort of said, aren't that pleased with the social media interaction, or sort of the sort of lack of cohesion between the fans and the club. There's a large sort of separation, and it just puzzles me how they could not see that bio could easily be misconstrued without the context. So I think it's just a bit sort of I don't know what's the word, sort of, it's not been like properly thought through, even though they saw it as a joke. I don't know, if I was to do it, I would sort of think, are other people going to see that as a joke? Are the fans going to see it as we see it, or could they see it differently? And I've barely seen anybody, apart from the social media team, say that they could see that as being a joke. So,
I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, the bio as it reads, it doesn't sort of say to me it's a joke. It's obviously incited a lot of strong feeling about it, because on the day it was pointed out, it was all I saw, on my Twitter feed. So, yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that the relationship between the Panthers organisation and the fans is delicate. So that has to be very carefully considered when reaching out on social media, because social media is just it's king at the minute, and it's what everybody reaches to. Gone are the days when you'd ring the Panthers hotline for goal updates. That's I'm sure it still exists, but I don't think anybody's using that anymore. So, social media, it's very important to get it right, as we've seen. I mean, if we think back a couple of seasons, it's leaps and bounds away from where it used to be. But I think you do have to very carefully consider everything that you're doing as an organisation, so that you can continue to make the strides and continue to build on the good work that you've done. So that's my sort of two pennyworth. Right then, gents, I think we've sort of talked all of the news and all of the games to death. We'll just have a look at a few stats, I think. Okay, so just a few bits and bobs from the last few weeks, basically. So, Panthers, when we came into December, we were second in the league. We have dropped as far as third. There is a significant gap at the moment between third and fourth, and but if we carry on playing against Fife like we did, then that gap's going to become smaller and smaller. Fife are perennial fourth place at the moment, so they're probably looking up and looking at our coattails. One very disappointing stat: we have 6 points of a possible 14 from the festive and New Year periods. We've already sort of talked that to death and said, yeah, that's disappointing. Not really good enough. Not really where we expect to be. Power play as of up to at the end of yesterday. We are currently 6th in the league, and the penalty kill is currently 3rd, which very much better than where it was last week, surprisingly. So that's one little bit of positive news we can hang on to. A few points stretching over the last 7 games that we have been talking about. Shining lights, points-wise, we've got Pellini with 4 goals and 5 assists, Kovacs with 2 goals and 7 assists, Guptill 6+1, Hurtubise 0+7, and then it sort of gets spread out neatly amongst various other players amongst that. Now, one particular player I do want to touch on, and I was very surprised when I was having a look back, because I record, all my stats and what have you, and stick out some pretty graphs and what have you when I've got time to. Anybody who's following me on Twitter will know that I geek out every now and then. But what I can do sometimes is I'll sort of just blindly put things in, and I concentrate on getting it all right and what have you, and I don't really take in the information. So when I was looking back and collecting all the stuff that I wanted to put on for tonight, I saw that Pither in the last 7 games has a solitary assist, and that really, really surprised me. For all the fuss and fanfare of his re-signing in the summer, I found that to be astounding. His production seems to have disappeared off a cliff, doesn't it, Joe?
Yeah, I think. I don't think this is. I don't know if I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but for me, I think Pither is another one that sort of doesn't get as much stick as I think he potentially should do, because, like you said, recently he's gone pretty much invisible. I mean, only 1 assist, and when you think about assists, you could think, oh, this player's got loads of assists, but when you're sort of watching it in game, this could just be like a simple pass, and it's like, and then this player could go on to a solo goal. But you look at his stats and you think, oh, he's got loads of assists. I suppose it's just sort of a bit more context. It's just stats aren't everything, but because he is quite high up in our sort of our points leaderboard for our team. But for me, this season, I was expecting him to be that sort of go-to player that we could sometimes, if needed, rely on to dig us out of a hole. Sort of if we need a bit of sort of a offensive spark, he could just sort of pluck something out of nothing, like he did on a few occasions last season. And I seem to remember him doing an interview at the start of this season, basically saying he could shoulder that responsibility to do it again this year. And for me, he has not been able to. He's been far from it. And also when you include, like Sam mentioned earlier, the fact that he takes quite a lot of dumb, needless penalties in our opponent's sort of defensive zone when he really shouldn't be. And if you include defensively, I think he makes sort of needless turnovers that sort of lead to us getting counted on quite easily. So, yeah, I think Pither is sort of sliding under the radar here for me, but in terms of criticism compared to some others.
One other thing that I did find surprising when I was sort of putting these points together, and I'll come to you on this one, Sam. I think one of were Adam here on the podcast, he might be tempted to talk about Brett Pelini. He has mentioned on one or two occasions that he's not quite given us what we got from him last season, but in over this festive period, he's been another one that has actually been a bit of a a bit of a spark for us. He's actually and I think it sort of it kind of went under the radar. I think it kind of went a little bit unnoticed, but he's scored 9 points in the last, in that 7 games. So, he's is that acceptable production? I mean, in the last 7 games, yeah, I would probably say it is acceptable production. But are we expecting too much from Pelini?
Personally, I don't think so, because he is now our number 1 Brit, and he's an import quality Brit, and he is. I expect from last season's performance for us last season for GB, I expected him to be a go-to guy for us this year, and thus far he hasn't been. But he's starting to pick up now. Hopefully, he can keep that going through to the end of the season. And, maybe he can drag some of the other players up with him, because there's quite a few. I was surprised that sort of Hercules is one of our bigger point scorers. He's got 7 assists. But from what it was said when he was brought in to be a goal scorer. And I'd expect that a lot of those assists are on Guptill's goals. So I think, Guptill is sort of dragging Hercules along, because start of the year, he had a few power play goals, but since then he's just been dreadful. For me, he's just been phoning it in. And for someone who I expected to be another go-to guy, he's just not producing.
I mean, there's quite a lot of surprises, I suppose, in there. Unless there's anything else from the little few stats there that you guys want to talk about, we'll move on.
No.
Right, jolly good.
No.
Okay, so we'll finish up tonight with the games that are upcoming for the Panthers this weekend. It's a bit of a quiet one for midweek. I think there's the first games are actually the weekend games for the whole of the Elite League. So Panthers will be playing Manchester Storm at home on Saturday, and on Sunday we'll be going down to Ice Arena Wales to play the Cardiff Devils. Joe, I would say that we're probably going to be looking to set the record straight on Saturday, aren't we?
You'd imagine so, and you'd hope so, but there has been many occasions this season where we're in a situation like what we are now, where we've just come off the defeat to an opponent and we're playing them again not long after, and the same things happen again, we've just not turned up. So while you'd hope the fact that we got beat in their rink, that will be some sort of motivation for us to sort of take the 2 points off them in our own rink. But there's been many occasions where we've looked like our motivation is non-existent. So I can't exactly sound confident for this one.
Sam, do you feel any different about Saturday's game than your brother?
Not really, no. I think I've come to the point now where if you don't expect anything from the Panthers, then you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, short and sweet. Sunday we're heading down to play the Cardiff Devils. Cardiff is still with a few little wobbles along the way, they're still looking pretty good for the three-peat, aren't they, Joe?
Yeah, I think recently they've been on a bit of a. I know they were on a bit of a wobble a few weeks back, and sort of the focus seemed to sway towards Belfast in terms of favourites, but I mean, in terms of their last 11 games, I think it is. No, last 10 games. They've won 9 and lost 1. So that's quite, when you think of sort of our form compared to Cardiff's, especially as we go into Cardiff's rink, that's quite a scary prospect when you think that there's a reasonable chance that we might put in a performance similar to that against Fife, against Cardiff. So that's a scary thought. However, I mean, we have had some good games against Cardiff this year, but we weren't as bad as we are now back then. So, yeah, like Saturday, I'm definitely not confident for this one.
Your dad won't be happy that you're stealing his catchphrase, but anyway,
No,
Sam, I'll let you have the final word, as it were. I mean, I'm not horrendously confident about Sunday. I'm never confident about us bringing points out of Ice Arena, Wales, and as Joe says, Cardiff are on a good run of form at the moment, and even the arrival of an ex-NHLer, a recent ex-NHLer, didn't seem to do anything to improve our fortunes following the usual Christmas slump.
Yeah, I mean, like it's been said, it's a tricky place to go. We don't have, it's a bit like with Coventry. We seem to do fairly well at home against them, but away from home, it's a different story. So I could easily see this being a 0-point weekend.
Well, fingers crossed that we can do a little bit better than that, and maybe the tone of next week's podcast will be a less grumpy one. Maybe we can talk about something happy. Who knows? We'll just have to see. We'll be back. Which leads me nicely on. We'll be back next week for the usual review podcast. Well, thank you very much for sticking with us, if you're still with us live. As I said, a bit of a long one, a lot to go through as we had our little Christmas hibernation. So welcome to 2019 as a Panthers fan, and we'll see you next time. Ta-da!